For figure P2-12, we're going to use splines. And this has kind of an elliptical shape to it, and an ellipse is a spline, a partial ellipse, a parabola. Most of our mathematical constructs, what's the other one, a conic, those are the intersections of a cone, depending on whether the plane, which way the plane cuts it. Even a circle comes down to the intersection of a cone. Spline, however, is going to have these points that we're going to be able to control curvature and do some basic shapes. So because of the complexity or the adding of these points, we'll do that as a separate cut. So we want to generate this outside geometry first. We can mirror across the y-axis and we'll get started and see what that gives us. So this part is in millimeters. We'll be back in metric. And my preferred front plane, left click on the sketch, left click on the plane, left click on the sketch, puts you into it. Center line, vertical, infinite length. All right, advantage of infinite length is I will not run out of center line. And then rather than backing out of it, find it's usually just as good to hit the OKs. The other thing is that if I miss the origin a little bit, it gives me a chance to correct it. If I see that that line is in blue, then I can drag the line and drag it back to the origin. Usually it'll snap right to it, and for the coincidence, or it was there and it just hadn't solved for it yet. All right, so a couple of things that come up. All right, so I'm going to sketch this shape. I don't really care, maybe not make it too big, but really don't care about the geometry. I'm just going to go for the profile. This doesn't really lend itself to making a rectangle and cutting the stuff out. And then kind of repositioning just real quick. The zoom is at the center of the cursor. So if I put the cursor at the origin, it's going to zoom pretty close to that, and the cursor is going to move towards it or away from it. So if I move the cursor up a little bit, it's kind of a weird way to zoom, and I do it without thinking about it. So I'm going to try and bring that up a couple times to where you can see what's going on. There is a perpendicular. I'm pretty sure that's not perpendicular. So when I see those inference lines and I see those little yellow box, it's just a quick decision. Do I want it to be perpendicular and infer that for me, or move a little ways off so that it does not make that inference? All right, so zooming out a little bit with the middle mouse wheel scroll button, I have gone right to left on my window pick. So right to left is everything that the box crosses. From left to right is only what is in the box. So for an immediate mirror, I'm going to get the result, and then a few more of the relations before I start doing the dimensions. I know that I want that one. We have vertical, we have symmetry for the points. I've selected that line. I'm going to hold down the control button. I'm going to select the other line and collinear. Just real quick, keep in mind that I could go point, and those would be vertical. And I could go line and point either way, and that would be coincidence. So depending on what you select, that's going to determine in some part the relations that you're getting. All right, so a right click, and the smart dimension is going to be my preference. You can always come up to the command manager and get into your smart dimension. So we have a 40. If I stay close to the line, I'm going to get a linear dimension. If I drag it down a little bit more, I'll get my horizontal. We go 40 and 20, and that little jump is it's scaling the drawing. So they're showing a 55 to the center of the, and then those are points. So what do we have here? A 20 and a 65 from the center line. All right, so double check the number here real quick, a 20. So that was convenient. Whenever it does that, though, I do want to give it a glance and make sure it's not a 0, 0, 0, 0, 1 out there. Sometimes that does mess with it. Over on the right, we have a 30, and then from the center, and then you're going to want to be careful when you're selecting this because we're at that double dimension. I've selected a center line and an object, and I'm between. If I happen to wander over here, I'm going to get the whole dimension. Well, we're given a 65, so I really don't want to double that and do that math. We're just going to stay with the 65. Our overall height is 100. And still had the center line selected. So once it's in that double dimension diametral radial mode, we'll see the center line. So maybe I can grab that real quick. Let's see if we escape out of that. No, we'll have to. I'll have to wait and try and remember to do that next time. So 100. There's some geometry that we can get to. Let's just put that in there temporarily for now. And right now it's showing a radial of the little r. If we'd gone to this side, then it would be defaulting to diametral. Right, so those little symbols are giving you clues again. Let's see, I got out of my, I'm clicking a lot. I need to get back into the dimension. Let's see, the 20 comes across there. Where's our to the base? 40 from the top and 30. So 40 and then 30. Again, I'm going to stay with picking the objects over the dimensions where I can. 20, let's see, what do we have for the inside? That may be a missing dimension. Doesn't look like it's popping up anywhere, at least I'm not seeing it. So since I can't identify it readily, I'm going to take my best guess, and that would be something that I would want to review when we get to the assembly. So I'm going to make it 15, and then a couple things that I can do is, let's see if we right click, maybe I can get that in the screen without moving it. We can mark it for the drawing, which was one of the reasons why under the options in the very first template, I told it that I only wanted to bring in dimensions that I mark. When I go over to the drawing, it's going to give me a default of bring in all dimensions. Well, if they're all marked for the drawing, then we're still bringing in all of the dimensions. So if I uncheck that box that says mark for drawing, then I can filter these out and say that one's kind of important. I don't know what it is. I wasn't able to find it. So I want to mark it, and I might even go so far as make it, oh, maybe not that one, and make it an inspection dimension and highlighting it that way. All right, so it gives us some options to set a reminder. Might catch it. Usually, my second iteration of going through the into the assembly is going to work. All right, so I did that again automatically, so let's discard and get out of that. We were kind of in this isometric view wherever it left it. All right, I could go back to the front plane. The front plane is over here, but any planar surface is valid to sketch on. So when I pick that face and it highlights, I can go right into the sketch. If we're in the sketch folder, I can do the same thing with it pre-selected. It's going to take me right in. For the center line then, and going to the down arrow, center line, we'll pick up the origin, and then I'll pick up the midpoint. And let's just get out of that and go to select, and we'll draw the line. I'm going to say we could probably use the midpoint line. We'll try that next. If I do the pull down, I don't use the midpoint very much, the midpoint line. So if I drag that out, then I get two sides. When I go to mirror this, though, I'm going to have to exclude that segment, otherwise it's going to create a duplicate entity. So these endpoints are going to be vertical. So select the endpoint, hold down the control, select the endpoint, make it vertical. All right, going into our spline tool, we have 1, 2, 3 intermediate points. So we'll pick, 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 pick. And then that will give us our geometry. So under the spline, there's a couple different styles of splines. So I know that they changed some things, and I don't know if this is the one that I want or I like. So we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then select to end it or escape to end it. All right, so our dimensions then are coming off of the center. So we'll get into the smart dimension, whichever way. Now this may not look exactly the same. We are getting the control arrows, so that's good. 15. Let's see, what else do we have? 20, and would assume then that, yeah, there's the extension line, so those two could be vertical. Since it has the little R, it's jumping right into it. So apparently it wants to stay in R, so I could escape and switch it over to D, but we're going to go 20, and then I can select and control select and go vertical. All right, so these now pretty much have that geometry. The heights then will start to bring this in. So I have a 55, a 20. Yeah, I guess I better look at the bottom because that's going to overrun. We have 10 to the bottom and 20 from the top. So let's get that positioned a little bit better. That looks like it's already above 20, so that's going to behave strangely. And reverse the curve. All right, so 20, that looks a little bit better. And then the last point was 70. All right, so that does not look terrible. One of the things we're going to have to watch for, as I mentioned, the arrows. These are going to control the degree of curvature and to a certain extent, the amount of tangency. So at this point, we don't want to play with those. We'll come back and I will mess this up after we finish. So with this selected, I can hold down the control button, select the center line, mirror the entities, need one more. For the line, I could draw that in, but since everything else was symmetric, then that can be symmetric. We go into our features, and we don't want this to be a boss, or at least I'm looking at it as that it will be a pocket. If we wanted it to, well, since we don't have a side view, I've always just done a cut extrude, which is a good example, but if we did a boss, it would be protruding out. If we do the extruded cut, then we're just going to tell it go through all or up to next. So through all makes the cut. We can save it, and then we'll go back and we'll look at what the effects of messing with the spline are. All right, so getting back into the sketch, if I expand that out, I can right-click on the sketch and go to sketch. If I left-click, I have a habit of right-clicking because it gives me all those other options, but a left-click in the feature tree on either of the unit, the sketch or the feature, will allow me to, if I'm at the feature level, edit the definition. Do I want it to be maybe I want to go back through and say, instead of a blind through all, I want to make a blind pocket and go halfway. All right, so we can make that adjustment. If I go into the sketch, and that time I right click, which gave me all of the other items, we can get back into the sketch, and let's just take one of these. Let's take the single at the end, and as I drag that, we're going to see it start to deform. And I can make some pretty weird shapes, and the one rule is that it does not self-intersect. The self-intersect is apparent because our shaded sketch contour goes away. All right, so if I bring that way, and I want to mess with that one that way, and all of this is still machinable because of the points and the curvature. There are some limitations to how smooth of a surface we can get in this, but we can make some pretty cool shapes with splines that would be kind of difficult otherwise. So we don't use splines too much in general. There are areas that use them a lot more, and certainly industries that use them all of the time. So be aware that they exist and where they may come up.